Hey guys, it's Alex Pearce at alexpierceproductions.com. Today we're going to be talking about the control points editor. The control points editor is really the key to stitching. I had someone recently email me with some questions about ghosting and how he could mask it out. And when I asked him how good his control points were, he said he really hated the process and doesn't really do it. To which I replied, I can't really help you until you've learned how to properly use the control points editor. So that's why I'm making the tutorial. But that's sort of like treating the symptom, not the problem. So sort of like if you pull a muscle in your back that makes your neck hurt, massaging your neck can only go so far. There are definitely deeper issues, and that's what we're getting into right now. So of course the first thing to do is to open up AVP. Now I've already synced this footage. I've synced it in Premiere, so I know that I'm 100% sure this is all synced. We're not getting any, it's not a tutorial on syncing, so we'll go ahead and push stitch in an area that looks like it's probably right. So just go Pro Hero 4. And then, of course, that's going to open up the preview window. And then we'll open up Giga. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and push edit. Open this up. Now if this is totally bizarre to you, go watch some of my other tutorials first. Control points editor is definitely important, but it's not the first thing you need to learn. So so definitely watch some of my earlier tutorials on you know, how to stitch. Okay, so I just did a basic straightening. I'm not worried about straightening again. So if we look at this with preview on, this looks, for the most part, this looks okay. You can see my head's chopped off here. This is me in the brown jacket. But overall, this looks okay. But I'm going to jump into control points, and so this is the control points tab. Let me go back here. So if I click on this control points tab, it's going to open up this window which says CP editor. It stands for obviously the control point editor. But then also in here, it also opens this tab on the left, and this is going to be really important later on. On Windows, they open up. It opens up a different window. I think on Mac, it opens up in the same, kind of in the same window. So for Windows, I push Alt Tab to get over, you know, to quickly get between program and program. In Mac, you push Command tilde, I believe. So what is the CP editor? So if I look over here, these are my cameras: camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I don't have anything selected, these are all the links that I have right now. So there's link between camera 1 and 2, between camera 1 and 3, 1 and 5, etc. If I click on any one of these, like camera 2, it'll show me all the links that 2 has. So 2 and 1, 2 and 3, 2 and 6, 2 and 7. And if I click on the link, it'll bring up camera 2 and camera 1, or camera 2 and camera 7, and where they have control points. So I'm going to unselect these. The other way you can select them is if I go camera 2 and then I hold control or command, I think, on Mac, and then push 7, it'll bring me up 1 and 7. So if when you came to this window, if there was no links at all, the first thing you would do is go up to this little green button here, and if you hover over it, it tells you what it does. Add control points using geometric analysis. So if you click this, it'll automatically generate these points and these links. So then one thing you can do is, if I'm selected on something, it's only going to show me a few of these. So if I unselect from anything, these are all the links I have right now. And one thing you can do is sort by RMS, and that'll give you different things. So RMS stands for root mean square. You don't need to know what that means, but basically the lower the number is, in general, the better the stitch. And I say in general because it's not necessarily the case. If I only have 1 point, this number is going to be low, but the stitch isn't going to be great. So it's sort of a balance between a low RMS and a high number of points. I may be skipping ahead, so I'll try to slow down here for a second. Okay, so again, let me sort by link. So I got 1, 2, 3 here. So on these two windows here, On this bottom window here, you have link, which I've already explained. Points is the number of points. So if I click on link 1 and 2, there are 216 of these control points. These are obviously the control points. If I click 22, this 22 corresponds with this 22, and maybe I can find a better one. Like this 120, it'll be a little easier to see that this point is the same thing that's right here. So that's what points is. That's how many points you have in these two pictures. Visual similarity is what it sounds like. It's how much does camera 1 and 2 look like each other. If you're using different lenses, visual similarity can most likely say a lower percentage, even though it's the same image. But I don't find visual similarity to be very helpful, so just keep that in mind. The other thing you have here is this control points tab. So the control points tab, whichever link you're selected on, so if I'm selected on 2 and 6, images 2 and 6, if I click on this control points, this is all 2 and 6. You see that on the left side? This is all between links 2 and 6. This shows me what their points are. So if I sort by index, this will be, if I hold 1, let's see, so here's control point 7 here, 7 and 7. I click here, this will be control point 9. But what's really great is you can sort by RMS. So if I click on this one, I can't see where it's at. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Like this one is the RMS is really good. 0.3. It's like it's incredible. It means that this point is almost exactly where this is supposed to be. If I do it again, this is 4.8. It's not too bad. It's not horrible, but that definitely can be improved. So this point and this point is close, but it's not that close. So we're gonna get back into this and why this is important later on. But let's go back. Let's Tarantino this and go back to the beginning. So let's click off. I'm gonna click here so that it frees up. It shows me all my links. I'm gonna sort by RMS, and I'm gonna work on the worst one. So this 3.19 is the worst one. Links camera 5 and camera 7. And so what I'm going to do here, and again, this is more important when you have some serious issues, when it's not lining up, when it's hard for the program to find control points. But I'm going to go ahead and delete these so you can see a little bit better what I'm going to do. Now to delete these points, you can, well, let me step back. So this button right here, add auto control points, this is the default setting, the default tool. So if you have this tool selected, you can click and drag. See that? And click and drag. And so I'm going to click and drag and then push delete. On PC, on Mac, it's the forward delete button. I don't know what you call it. I think it's just called delete. If you have a MacBook, you have to hold command. No, you hold function and push backspace to delete those. The other way you can do it, I'm just going to show you an example real quick. The other way you can do it is if you select those, if you click and drag, you can come up here to this minus here, and that's delete selected control points. Okay, so I already sort of showed you what this tool does, the main part of this tool. So what this tool does is I say, okay, I see that this tripod is in both images. So I'm going to click and drag on both images, and it'll automatically generate control points based off of what I did. So I can also see that this trash can, this wall here, part of this fence, this is all in the same picture. So what I could do is just click and drag over both areas, and it doesn't really matter how large. The larger the box this is, the more it's going to work. So it'll take a little longer to process, but if you have a fast computer, that's not a problem. So you can see it automatically generated some points really quickly. That's great. What I like to do is add a whole bunch of points. So let's see, what link are we on here? 5 and 7? Yeah, 5 and 7. So if I look here, I've got 198 points right now. Well, I can click and drag and add some more. What I like to do is add a lot of points. So like when I say a lot, I mean maybe 500. Sometimes I do more, sometimes I do less, but 500 is a good general rule. And if I'm looking here, I can see, okay, it went up to 420. If I look at my RMS, 3.86. Let's see what happens if we add some more control points. 3.86. What's this going to go to? 3.74. It's getting a little bit lower, but if we keep doing this, eventually it's going to start getting worse. 3.76. So just adding control points doesn't necessarily make it better, and you'll see why in a bit. So it's starting to add points that aren't so good. So if I look, green is good. So the brighter green, the better the RMS. These kind of dull ones here, and then of course getting to red, these are the worst control points. So one thing you can do is you can highlight those and push delete, or you can highlight these and push minus here. But for now, don't delete anything, because even if it's a bad point right now, the next step is going to help tighten all these up, and that's this button right here, quick optimization. So if I click quick optimization, you'll see that it turns, you see how it turned everything slightly greener. Now, it didn't fix everything. These are still not that great, but yeah, it did a good job. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to back up. I'm going to back up here. So if I click over, let me just delete these. Nah, I'll leave them up for now. So let's go back to our picture. So that was cameras 5 and 7. So cameras 5 and 7. These two cameras right here. Now if I just hover over these two, they look like they're pretty good. They look like they're pretty good, and it looks, to me, it looks like it's a pretty decent thing. So now let's look over. We're gonna get into this more, but let's look into these, because this is where we're having our problems right here. My head's cut off. So it looks like it's between cameras 3 and 2. But one thing I want you to realize is sometimes when it looks like the problem is here, the problem is really that it's this image, this whole image here, has to compensate for, it has to match cameras 1, or links 1, 2, 4, and 7. So even though the problem looks like it's between 3 and 2, sometimes the problem is really that between 3 and 1. And sometimes even deleting these links will make, like, say for instance, if I deleted link 1, that might actually make this whole thing better. So just keep that in mind as you move through the control points editor. But right now we're going to focus on camera 3. That's the one that's problem. So if we go back to control points, I can click off this. I can click on camera 3, and now I see that these are the four cameras that have issues with this. So I can click through here and look at which images these are. And let's see, 3 and 2. So it's really 3 and 7. 3 and 7 that are way off. So let's work on 3 and 7 first. So one thing to keep in mind is that you can't stitch for the really close foreground and the really far background. I'm not so close to this that it's unusable, but if I were closer, it could be unusable without some serious work done. But if you notice, there's no control points at all on me, and that's, that could be good or bad depending on what we're doing. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to delete all these control points that are not on me and only add control points on me and see what that does. So if I click and drag, these are all red, but again, when I push quick optimize, it's going to help make those green or closer to green. So I'm going to keep adding points right here. Typically, you don't want to add control points on somebody who's moving for more reasons than one. One reason being that even though I've synced this footage, I'm still not quite 100% in the same spot as I am here. I might be 1/60th of a second off, right? Whereas this point's never going to move. This concrete, if this was a stable shot, this concrete's not going to move. Okay, so I'm gonna move over here and show you that you can also push quick optimization here, and that's great because I want to be able to look here. So I pushed it. Let's see what happens. Okay, it's correcting lens distortion. Let's see what happens. There we go. My head's back. Did you see that? Did you see how my head just jumped back into space? So yeah, that looks a lot better. It's hard to see. It looks really weird, but it could just be because I'm at the bottom part of the camera here. But what I'm going to do now, and you can see how it made all those red points, it made them mostly green. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go in to the other points here and try to fix these a little bit. So I can see that these points are red, these are green. Well, one thing I could do is just delete these bad points, and let's watch what happens to our RMS. Our RMS is 4.77. If I delete the bad points and push Quick Optimize, 4.77 goes to 3.81. So that in theory that made it better. Let's see if it changed anything here. I don't see anything too noticeable. But if I hover back and forth, if you look right here, when I hover back and forth, they're not quite aligned. So again, that could be an issue with it having camera 2 having to compensate much for 6 or 1 or 7, etc. But let's go back here and let's add points right where our problem is, and that's always a good thing to do. You know, for instance, the sky is not going to be that big of a deal, but where this umbrella is going to be a problem. So let's add a bunch of control points. I'm going to take this time also to say that you can manually add control points. If I click this, I can go to this tree over here, and then I can go, oh, okay, well that's this part right here, and click it. But it's not very accurate. I haven't used manual control points, since I've used PT GUI, really, and I still use PT GUI every once in a while, but yeah, in AVP I find that the auto control points is fine. So I'm gonna go back to our picture to push Quick Optimization. So we're looking right here, we're looking between 3 and 2 to see if we can notice a difference. Quick Optimize. Yeah, I think it definitely tightened things up. So it went from 5 something RMS to 3 something RMS. So now if we hover over these, now it looks like it's in the right area. You see that, how they're pretty much the same space. While we're on this page, I can also show you here if you didn't realize. So these, obviously, like this red one or this yellow one here, these lines are links. So camera 1 is linked to camera 3, camera 1 is linked to camera 2, etc. This number right here on the top is RMS, so 2.85 RMS. This bottom number is how many points there are, 181 points between cameras 1 and 3. So we're going to go back. What were we working on, 5 and 7? Nope, we had already done 5 and 7. So let's sort by RMS again and work on the next one. And it is typically good to work on the worst RMS and work your way down. But you can do these any way you want. I mean, if you want, a lot of times I'm going to go through all the links anyway. So sometimes I just go right down the line, you know, all the way down the line for the links. But it's not a bad thing to start with the worst RMS. It makes the most sense in a lot of cases. So if we look here, we can see that, okay, well, where do these pictures stitch? So if I hover over these, it'll show us that this point is this point here, etc. So what do we want to do? So this is me, this is my foot there, this is here. So what I might just do is just hover over all of this and click it and see what happens. You know, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you know, since you can't stitch for the foreground and background, sometimes it's good to delete points that are closer to the foreground so that you get a better background stitch, or vice versa. Okay, so I'm going to just keep adding points here. I'm just clicking and dragging to highlight areas, and that automatically generates my control points. And then I'm going to show you another trick here. So now I've got 369. Now I've got almost 500. Let's do it one more time. So another way, instead of clicking and dragging over these bad points and deleting them, I'm going to go ahead and optimize. So instead of like individually clicking this one and this one, or selecting all these bad ones, another thing you can do is, if you go to this tab here, we have images 2 and 7 selected. If I go to the control points tab, remember I can sort by RMS, and then I can click and just delete the worst points. And since we had 500 points, I could go through and delete like 250 of them. But before I do that, you want to see where these points are that I'm deleting. So it looks like I'm deleting every point along this line here. You see that? All these points are going to go. And then a lot of these points, basically what we're going to be left with is just this area here. Well, that might not be a problem, but in some situations that could be a big problem. For instance, if I was trying to stitch me, and all the points that I put on me were going to be deleted. Obviously we don't want to do that, you know. So you gotta, before you just delete 250 points, make sure you know what you're deleting. I'm going to go ahead and delete these though. Let's go back to our panorama, and let's see. This was what, links 2 and 7. So if we look at 2 and 7, these are the cameras that we're going to be optimizing. If I look between here and here, can't see much of a difference now. Let's see what happens if we push optimize. Okay, I don't know if it made it better or worse, because there's this crack now. See that? If I zoom in here, and it's always good to zoom in to see where your problems are. Now there's this line here. I can see maybe that's the line 2, the stitch point. So maybe that didn't work so well, or maybe that's a problem between camera 6 and 2. Let's see. Let's go back and let's see if we can find. I think this is where we deleted those points. Remember? So let's see what happens if we add points here, even if they're not perfect. Let's see what happens if we. I'm going to add those, and now I'm going to push optimize and see what happens. We're looking right here. Up, it fixed it. So that's a great example of how, even though these aren't the best RMS, you know, these points here, all my worst points are, you know, probably in this area, like right here, here. You know, these are all bad points. So, let me go back to the top here. So this RMS here, 6, oh, you would think, oh, 6 is a bad number. Well, not necessarily, because if all my points are here and that fixes this problem here, who cares what the number says? So again, this is, RMS is a science, but using the control points editor is an art. So you got to kind of use your own eye to see what works there and what doesn't work. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out. Let's see. Actually, let's look and see if we can see any major stitching errors. It's hard to tell. Looks pretty good to me. Looks pretty good. So I would, even though it looks good, I would still go through, especially if I was working with a client, I would definitely still go through all of my links, and I would add points, delete them, add points, delete them. You know, this one, let's see what happens if we delete these. Let's add some more over here. So I've got, do it one more time. Once that's done, zoom out so we can see the difference. This is links 4 and 7, so links 4 and 7 here. If I push optimize, let's see if that makes it any better. And it's always good to look and check, because even if it looks great now, you could actually make it worse by adding more control points. So it's always good to continue to look and see what happens between each one. So 5 and 6. These all look okay. So I'm going to keep going through and adding more. So you see how this is working now. See, that looks okay. That looks okay. In general, what I like to do is get my RMS below 3. So I like to have it between 2 and 3. Again, you know, it's an art and a science. So, you know, one thing you can do, you know, you can go through and you can do everything you need to do, but at the end of the day, does it look good? If it looks good, that's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and delete these bad points here. Push optimize and look here so I can see my RMS. 4.4, 4.47. Okay, I'm gonna add some more points. Optimize. 3.8. Delete some bad ones. Optimize. 3.8 drop to 3.04. What did that do to my picture? Looks fine. You know, and again, if you have a real problem stitch, if you have a real problem, you know, this will be more important than a case like this where, you know, it's not that big of a deal. If you're using the control points editor and trying to fix something that's really close, that's a whole nother issue. I will do a tutorial on that in the future, but for now, don't worry about that as far as this tutorial goes. This tutorial is just an overall broad view of the control points editor. So the last thing we're going to talk about is full optimization. So if you're on the CP editor, you can see that there's this other button here, optimize the panorama, and right now it's grayed out. Well, if we go to this window, the panorama window, and I think the default is to not have advanced mode on. If you click advanced mode, there's all these other things here. So you have filters, steps, scopes, points. So this, typically just leave this. I don't filter anything out. You can mess with all these settings, and I think that's the best thing to do, is don't be afraid to mess with anything. You're not going to screw it up too bad. You could always reset the settings. You could always uncheck advanced mode. Don't be afraid to play around with anything in AVP. Okay, so filters, I basically don't use filters. Points, I leave this at the default, I believe. And the quality detection high, number of control points 100, filtering mode spherical, find control points where none exist, RMS max 10. You know, you could play with these settings, but in general the default is totally fine. Steps, these are the default things. You can choose to make it clean the bad points and the bad links. Again, I don't like to do that. I like to manually clean those things out, and there's no reason why you shouldn't do them manually either, because you have no control over what's a bad point and what's a bad link. And again, remember, we had one that was, the RMS was pretty bad, but it made our stitch better for this area right here. So again, I use this manually. Local global is fine, but this tab right here, scopes, this is a really important tab, and this is where you can, especially if you're having some serious issues, this is definitely one that you want to check out. So you've added all your control points and you've got good RMS, but you're still having issues. Well, one thing you can do is you go to this scopes tab, and again, you have to click advanced mode to be here. Click advanced tab, go to distortion, where it says keep current value. You're going to optimize. So there's different theories on what these mean. Optimize first order, second order, third order. According to Making 360, first order is the far background, second order is like mid to far background, third order is like close up. But according to color, it's something different. I don't really have the best answer for you for what it is, because I don't frankly understand it. I don't understand it when I've read the tutorials from color. I don't understand it from Making 360's point of view. I don't really understand it, how it works, because for me, if it's optimizing the distortion, it's optimizing, how much, basically how much to defish. That's my understanding of what I would say optimizing for distortion would do. So, so I'm not going to give you a very clear answer here, but what I would say is, in general, optimizing in second order is good. And then you have these settings here, image group pano. And what that will do is, if you have it set to image, then it's going to optimize each image. 1, 2, it's going to optimize 1, it's going to optimize 2, optimize 6, 5, 4, etc. If you have it to pano, it's going to do a general, it's going to make them all the same distortion. So it's going to figure out like whatever the medium is. So like, oh, this one needs to distort by this much, and this one needs to distort by this much. It'll find a middle ground and distort them evenly. And group, I'm not 100% sure on group. My thought would be that, you can make groups down here. I can click this and I can add, I can make a new group here, move to new group, whatever. So maybe this group is based on that, but I find that even without these group settings, or even without making new group, if I choose group, it'll change. So I would think that if there were no groups, that group and pano would be the same thing, but there is a difference. So I hope I have confused the heck out of you, because that's what color has done to me. But no, seriously though, it's not rocket science. There's not 100 different levers here to mess with. So, you know, you only have so many options you can choose. So my suggestion is, especially if you're having problems, just come in here and start messing with stuff, specifically the distortion level. So if I click optimize second order and I choose image, let's see what happens. And to do that, you click this full optimization here. So if I click full optimization, let's look at the pano and let's see what it does. So it changed it a little bit. I saw a bigger difference right here on me. So if I can control Z, see me here, see I'm like a little bit squished, but if I do this in second order on image, full optimization, look at me, it's gonna make me a little taller and less plump. So I like that. I'm gonna keep that. Let's see what happens if we drag this over to pano. And again, I'm using second order here. So not that big of a change. It kind of squished me a little bit, no problem. Let's try first order. We'll keep it on pano and see what happens. That changed it quite a bit. Not necessarily better or worse. It just changed it. Let's switch to image. Take a look. That seemed to like zoom out in a way. So just messing with the different distortion here. So I'm going to go to third order, see what happens. Not that big of a change. Go to pano. Changed it a little bit, but nothing too crazy. So I think my favorite was still second order pano. So I'm going to click full optimize. I'm going to look at me and see, does it make me taller and skinnier? If so, I like it. I didn't see much of a difference at all. So so maybe this particular example is not the best one to mess with this section. Certainly if you do have people in the foreground, if you have images, if you have a lot of things in the foreground and background, messing with this distortion will make a difference. Focal, typically focal, I keep it on image, even though you think, well, wouldn't the focal length be the same for every camera, because they're all GoPros. If I look down, if I look in my cameras here, if I just open this tab here and look down, you can see that, yeah, even though the lenses are quote-unquote the same, if I look at the computed focal, they're a little bit different. So they're around 16 millimeters or 17 millimeters, but based on how they were made, based on how they're focused, you know, they can actually be a little bit different. So so that's why, you know, using image is usually best for optimize, because these are a little bit different. If you switch it to pano, it's just going to find the middle ground between, you know, all of these, like say between like 15.9 and 17.5, and it's going to use that as a solid across the board. And sometimes that might be a decent way to do it, but in general, I find optimize in the image is the best. And offset, you can see the offset here. Again, same thing. The offset's different for both, so I leave optimize in image setting, and that's the overall view of the control points editor. I know it's crazy. I know it's a little weird. The UI is a little weird, but you know, it does a great job. So you know, people complain about the UI, and I complain about the UI and not understanding it. I've probably done this 100 times and I still have no idea how to really vocalize what it is that it does. But you know, it does a great job of making the image look pretty, which is the ultimate goal. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to point out. I think that pretty much covered everything. So yeah, I hope this tutorial was helpful. I hope that your confusion has lessened. I'm sure you're probably still a little confused, but don't worry, I am too, and so is everyone else doing it. So yeah, I hope if anything, the thing I hope that I get across in this tutorial is that don't be afraid to try it. Don't be afraid to try messing with advanced mode in these settings. Don't be afraid to add control points here. Don't be afraid to delete control points here. Definitely play around with it. Get as familiar as possible as you can. And yeah, and I hope you have great experiences stitching in the future. So again, this is Alex Pearce, alexpearceproductions.com. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to comment if you have any questions or suggestions. Certainly, if you understand the optimization settings, if you understand them better than I do, I'm certainly open for your feedback. But yeah, have a great day and happy stitching.